She never imagined that 3 words whispered in a language she swore she'd never speak again could destroy everything. In one breath, the careful life she'd built, quiet, invisible, safe, crumbled like ash. Within seconds, every eye in that room turned toward her, and the most dangerous man in New York fixed his gaze on her face. Nobody knew what those words meant. Nobody knew who she really was. But he would find out. And when he did, the secrets buried in her blood would rise like ghosts, dragging her into a world of violence, betrayal, and a past she couldn't outrun. What happened next would change not just her life, but the fate of everyone caught in the crossfire. Welcome to Nemeze's story, where African folktales meet real-life lessons that will change how you see the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. Ava Monroe moved through Ravenna Noir like a shadow. She had perfected the art of being invisible. In a restaurant where mobsters, politicians, and billionaires gathered under crystal chandeliers, invisibility was survival. She carried trays, refilled glasses, and smiled politely while never meeting anyone's eyes for too long. That was the rule. Never be memorable. Never be noticed. For 3 years, it had worked. New York City had taught her that lesson the hard way. The city didn't forgive mistakes, and Ravenna Noir was its beating heart. A place where power brokers made deals that could topple governments, where blood debts were settled over Italian wine, where neutrality was the only law that mattered. Ava had chosen this place deliberately. It was the last place anyone would look for someone like her. She was wiping down a table near the back when the atmosphere shifted. The low hum of conversation dipped. Heads turned toward the entrance. Ava didn't need to look up to know someone important had arrived. She felt it in the tension that rippled through the room like electricity before a storm. Jang Seok-Jin entered with the confidence of a man who owned everything he saw. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a black suit that cost more than Ava made in 6 months, he moved through the restaurant with 5 men trailing behind him. His reputation arrived before he did. Korean crime lord, ruthless enforcer, a man who'd built an empire on fear and precision. Ava had heard the whispers. Everyone had. She kept her head down, focusing on her tables, her movements mechanical. Don't look. Don't engage. Don't exist. But fate had other plans. Seok-Jin was seated in her section. Of course he was. Ava approached the table with practiced calm, her notepad ready, her expression neutral. She took their drink orders in silence, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything was going according to plan, until she turned to leave. Look at her, one of Seok-Jin's men said in Korean, his voice dripping with contempt. They let anyone work here now. Probably doesn't even understand what we're saying. Ava's hand tightened around her notepad. She kept walking. Dogs should know their place, another man added, laughing. At least she's quiet. Her feet stopped. Just for a second. It was enough. Seok-Jin noticed. His dark eyes tracked her movement, curiosity flickering across his face. Ava should have kept walking. She should have swallowed the insult like she'd swallowed 100 others. But something inside her, something she'd kept locked away for years, snapped. She turned slowly, her eyes finding Seok-Jin's across the table. And then she spoke. 3 words. Calm. Clear. Perfectly pronounced in a Korean dialect so rare that only a handful of people in the entire country would recognize it. I understand everything. The restaurant went silent. Forks froze midair. Conversations died. Even the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Seok-Jin's expression transformed from mild interest to something darker, something dangerous. His men stared at Ava as if she'd pulled a gun. She'd just shattered the only protection she had. Seok-Jin leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost curious. Say that again. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face blank. Your drinks will be ready shortly. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, feeling his gaze burning into her back. Her hands trembled as she pushed through the double doors. What had she done? 3 years of careful silence, destroyed in 3 words. Marco, the head chef, looked up from the grill. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Ava lied. She wasn't fine. She'd just painted a target on her back. Men like Jang Seok-Jin didn't forget. They didn't forgive. And they especially didn't ignore mysteries. For the rest of the night, Ava felt his eyes following her. Every time she approached his table, The conversation stopped. His men watched her with suspicion and something close to fear. But Seok-Jin just watched, his expression unreadable, his mind clearly working through a puzzle she'd accidentally revealed. When his party finally left, Ava thought she could breathe again. She was wrong. As she cleared their table, she found something that made her blood run cold. A business card, placed deliberately where only she would see it. No name, no address, just a phone number and 3 words written in that same rare dialect. "We need to talk." Ava stared at the card, her mind racing. She'd spent years running from her past, from the language her father taught her, from the world he'd tried to protect her from before he disappeared. Now that world had found her, and it wore the face of the most dangerous man in New York. She pocketed the card and finished her shift in silence. But as she walked home through the neon-lit streets, she knew her old life was over. The question wasn't if Seok-Jin would come for her. The question was when, and what he'd do when he discovered the truth about who she really was. Ava didn't call the number. For 3 days, she pretended the card didn't exist, that those 3 words hadn't changed everything. She went to work, served tables, and avoided eye contact with everyone. But pretending didn't make danger disappear. It only delayed the inevitable. On the 4th night, Seok-Jin returned to Revenant Noir. This time, he came alone. He didn't sit in her section. He didn't order food. He simply stood near the bar, watching her with the patience of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. When her shift ended at midnight, he was waiting by the employee exit. "You didn't call," he said in Korean, his voice casual, but his eyes sharp. Ava's grip tightened on her purse. "I have nothing to say to you, but I have questions for you." He stepped closer, and she noticed the way other people on the street seemed to melt into the shadows. "That dialect you spoke, it's not taught in schools. It's not in textbooks. My grandmother spoke it. She was from a village that doesn't exist anymore, wiped out decades ago. So tell me, Ava Monroe, how does a black waitress in New York know a language that shouldn't exist outside of a handful of old families in Korea?" Her real name. He already knew her real name. Fear coiled in her stomach, but she kept her voice steady. "You're mistaken. I don't make mistakes." Seok-Jin pulled out his phone, swiping through images before turning the screen toward her. "I make discoveries." The photo showed a man Ava hadn't seen in 15 years. Her father, Daniel Kwon, standing next to a younger version of Seok-Jin's father, both men smiling like brothers. The next photo showed her as a child, sitting on her father's shoulders, her mixed-race features clear even then. "Your father," Seok-Jin said quietly, "was my father's closest friend, his most trusted enforcer, until the night he betrayed us, stole $2 million, and disappeared. My father spent 5 years searching for him before he died. His last words were about finding Daniel Kwon, about making him pay." Ava's world tilted. "My father wasn't a criminal. Your father was a ghost. He changed his name, married an American woman, had you, and vanished into obscurity. But you..." Seok-Jin's eyes glittered with something between fascination and fury. "You're the key to finding what he stole. Not just money. Information. Leverage. Secrets that could destroy empires." "I don't know anything," Ava whispered. "He left when I was 12. I never saw him again." "Then why did you learn the language? Why did you perfect a dialect that takes years to master? People don't preserve the past unless it matters." Seok-Jin stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You're either his greatest protection or his greatest mistake. I intend to find out which." Before Ava could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 men stepped out, their intentions clear. Ava tried to run, but Seok-Jin caught her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You come with me willingly, we talk like civilized people. You run, and my men will drag you. Either way, you're coming." Ava thought about screaming. But who would help her? This was New York. People didn't interfere in business that wasn't theirs, especially when it involved men like Jang Seok-Jin. She looked into his eyes and saw determination that wouldn't bend. "If I come with you, you'll let me go afterward? If you give me what I need, yes." It was a lie. They both knew it. But Ava had run out of options. She let him guide her into the SUV, her mind racing through everything her father had told her, every story, every lesson, every warning she'd dismissed as paranoia. The vehicle drove for 20 minutes, leaving Manhattan behind, crossing into Brooklyn, finally stopping at a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside. Inside, it was transformed, an office space with expensive furniture, artwork on the walls, and enough security cameras to monitor a prison. Seok-Jin led her to a private room where a table was covered with documents, photographs, and files. Her entire life was spread across that surface. Birth certificate, school records, her mother's death certificate from when Ava was 16, her father's old passport, showing a name she didn't recognize. Sit, Seok-Jin commanded, and Ava obeyed, her legs weak. He remained standing, circling her like a prosecutor preparing his case. Your father didn't just work for my family. He knew everything. Bank accounts, blackmail material, political connections, trafficking routes. When he left, he took copies of it all. My father believed Daniel planned to sell that information to our enemies. But he never did. He just disappeared. Maybe he wanted out, Ava said. Maybe he was tired of the violence. Seok-Jin laughed bitterly. Men like your father don't get tired. They get scared. Something made him run, and it wasn't conscience. He planted his hands on the table, leaning close. What did he tell you before he left? Nothing. He just left. One morning he was gone. No note. No explanation. You're lying. I'm not. Ava's voice cracked. I was 12 years old. I came home from school, and he was gone. My mother cried for weeks. We had nothing. No money, no answers, nothing. If he stole from you, he didn't share it with us. Seok-Jin studied her face, searching for deception. Finally, he straightened. Then we have a problem. Because without that information, without proof of what he took, this becomes about blood debt. Your father's crimes become your inheritance. That's insane. I didn't do anything. In my world, family is everything. Sins passed down like heirlooms. His expression softened slightly, almost pitying. I didn't write these rules, Ava, but I live by them. Your father made me an orphan. My father died chasing ghosts, neglecting his real enemies, obsessed with Daniel Kwon's betrayal. That obsession cost him his life. Cost me my childhood. So yes, you'll pay that debt unless you give me another option. Ava's mind raced. There had to be something, some memory, some clue her father had left behind. Then it hit her. The storage unit. Her mother had paid for it until her death, and Ava had kept paying the fees out of habit, never bothering to clean it out. There's a storage unit, she said slowly. In Queens. My mother kept his things there. I never went through it all. Maybe there's something. Seok-Jin's eyes lit up with predatory interest. Then tomorrow, we visit Queens. And pray your father left answers, Ava Monroe. Because if that unit is empty, your usefulness ends. And in my world, useless things don't survive. Seok-Jin didn't take Ava home that night. Instead, he kept her in a secured apartment on the top floor of a building his family owned. 2 guards stood outside her door. The windows were reinforced. There was no escape. She was a prisoner wrapped in expensive sheets and marble floors. Sleep didn't come. Ava spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about her father, about the life he'd hidden from her, about the violence she'd inherited without consent. When dawn broke through the curtains, she felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped away everything she thought she knew about herself. Seok-Jin arrived at 8 in the morning with coffee and a cold expression. Get dressed. We leave in 10 minutes. The drive to Queens was silent. Ava sat in the back of the SUV, watching the city blur past, feeling the weight of Seok-Jin's expectations pressing down on her chest. When they reached the storage facility, a rundown building with rusted gates and flickering lights, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she'd been here before in a dream. Unit 237. Ava's hands trembled as she unlocked it. The metal door rolled up with a screech, revealing stacked boxes, old furniture, and the ghost of a life abandoned. Seok-Jin's men immediately began searching, tearing through boxes with efficient brutality. But Ava moved toward something else. A small wooden chest tucked in the corner, half hidden beneath a canvas tarp. She recognized it. Her father used to keep it locked in his study. She'd asked about it once, and he'd smiled sadly, saying, "Someday, you'll understand." The lock was rusted, but still intact. Seok-Jin appeared beside her, holding bolt cutters. He didn't ask permission. The lock snapped, and Ava opened the chest with shaking hands. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Ledgers filled with names and numbers. Photographs of men in expensive suits shaking hands with politicians. Bank statements showing millions moving through shell corporations. And at the bottom, a letter addressed to her in her father's handwriting. Ava's vision blurred as she unfolded it. The words were in Korean, in that same rare dialect. My daughter, if you're reading this, I am either dead or you've been found. I'm sorry. I tried to protect you from this world, but some legacies cannot be escaped. The men I worked for, the Jang family, they built their empire on more than drugs and extortion. Seok-Jin's older brother, Jang Minho, ran a trafficking network. Children, young women, bought and sold like property. I discovered it by accident. When I confronted his father, he told me to stay silent. Said it was business. Said family protects family, no matter the cost. I couldn't. I stole everything. Proof of their crimes, evidence that could destroy them, and I ran. Not for money. For justice. But I was a coward. I ran instead of fighting. Forgive me. The truth is in these pages. Use it wisely. Trust no one. Love always, Dad. Ava's hands shook so violently she dropped the letter. Seok-Jin picked it up, his eyes scanning the text. His face went pale, then darkened with fury. This is a lie, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Read the documents, Ava whispered. Read them and tell me it's a lie. For the next 2 hours, they sat in that storage unit while Seok-Jin went through every page. Ava watched emotions flicker across his face. Denial, rage, horror, grief. The evidence was undeniable. Shipping manifests, financial transactions, testimony from witnesses her father had secretly recorded, and photographs that made Ava's stomach turn. Young faces, terrified eyes, lives destroyed. When Seok-Jin finally looked up, his expression was shattered. My brother. My father protected him. Your father chose family over justice, Ava said quietly. My father chose justice over everything, including me. They both made terrible choices. Seok-Jin stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. If this is true, if my family built their empire on this, then everything I've defended, everything I've killed for, his voice broke. It's all built on bones. What will you do? Ava asked. He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something other than the ruthless crime lord. She saw a man confronting the collapse of his entire world. My brother is dead. Killed in a territorial dispute 3 years ago. But the network, if it still exists, his jaw clenched. I need to know. I need to see how deep this goes. Then let me help. Seok-Jin laughed bitterly. Why would you help me? I kidnapped you. Threatened you. Because my father spent his life running instead of fighting. I won't make the same mistake. Ava stood, meeting his eyes. These documents prove your family's crimes, but they also prove my father's cowardice. If that network still exists, if people are still suffering, then we finish what he started. Not for revenge. For them. Something shifted in Seok-Jin's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of a kindred spirit trapped by inherited sins. You understand what you're offering? This won't be clean. The people involved, politicians, businessmen, other families, they'll kill to keep this buried. Then we'd better move fast. Over the next week, Ava's captivity transformed into collaboration. Seok-Jin kept her close, but no longer as a prisoner. They worked side by side, tracing the network through her father's documents, discovering names that made even Seok-Jin pause. His family's empire was larger and darker than he'd imagined. Late one night, exhausted and surrounded by evidence of horrors, Seok-Jin looked at Ava and said something unexpected. Your father was braver than I thought. It takes courage to betray family for strangers. It takes courage to question everything you've been taught, Ava replied. You're doing that now. Or I'm destroying my own legacy. Maybe some legacies deserve to be destroyed. Seok-Jin smiled. A real smile, sad and weary. You're dangerous, Ava Monroe. Not because of what you know. Because of what you make me want to believe. Before she could respond, his phone rang. The expression on his face when he answered told Ava everything had just changed. When he hung up, his voice was sharp with urgency. Ravenna Noir is on fire. Someone knows what we're doing. They're sending a message. Ava's heart stopped. Marco. The staff. We go? Now. Seok-Jin grabbed his jacket, and for the first time, Ava saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For what they'd awakened. The war had begun. The smoke was visible from blocks away, a black column rising into the New York night like a funeral pyre. By the time they arrived, Ravenna Noir was an inferno. Flames licked through broken windows, glass littered the sidewalk, and firefighters battled the blaze while crowds gathered behind police barricades. Ava's chest tightened as she searched desperately for familiar faces. There. She spotted Marco and several staff members huddled near an ambulance, shaken but alive. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. A man stepped from the shadows, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. Victor Hale. Ava recognized him from her father's photographs. Head of a rival organization. One of the names circled in red across dozens of documents. He approached Seok-Jin with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Such a tragedy, Victor said smoothly. Neutral ground, burned to ash. Makes you wonder who'd be bold enough to break that sacred rule. Seok-Jin's voice was ice. You? Me? I'm just a concerned citizen. Victor's gaze shifted to Ava, recognition flickering across his face. Daniel Kwon's daughter. I heard you'd surfaced. Your father cost me a lot of money when he disappeared. I'm glad you found his little insurance policy. Saves me the trouble of searching. You won't touch those documents, Seok-Jin said. Victor laughed. You misunderstand. I don't want to destroy them. I want to use them. Your family's crimes, exposed to the world? The Jang Empire crumbles, and I absorb what's left. Your father protected a monster, Seok-Jin. Now everyone will know. He turned to Ava. Unless, of course, you'd prefer a different arrangement. Give me the evidence, walk away, and live quietly. Your father chose survival once. You could too. Ava felt Seok-Jin tense beside her, but she spoke first. My father chose to run. I choose to fight. Victor's expression hardened. Then you choose to die. His men moved from the crowd, hands reaching inside jackets. But Seok-Jin's men were faster, weapons drawn, creating a tense standoff in the middle of a burning street. Sirens wailed closer. Police would arrive in minutes. This isn't over, Victor said, backing away slowly. Enjoy your borrowed time. As he disappeared into the chaos, Seok-Jin pulled Ava away from the scene. He'll come for us. For the documents. We need to move them somewhere safe. No, Ava said firmly. We need to release them. All of them. Seok-Jin stared at her. That will destroy my family's name. Everything my father built. Everything your father built was rotten. Ava's voice cracked with emotion. Children suffered so your family could prosper. My father ran from that truth. You don't have to. You can choose differently. And what? Turn myself in? Spend my life in prison? Or use your power to dismantle what your family created? From the inside. Expose Victor Hale and everyone like him. Not just your family. All of them. Ava grabbed his arm. You said you wanted to know how deep this goes. Let's pull the entire network into the light. For a long moment, Seok-Jin said nothing. Then, slowly he nodded. If we do this, there's no going back. We'll have enemies everywhere. We already do. Over the next 72 hours, Ava and Seok-Jin orchestrated the exposure. They contacted journalists, federal investigators, and international authorities. They released documents strategically, timing each revelation for maximum impact. Names toppled like dominoes. Politicians resigned. Businessmen fled the country. Syndicate operations collapsed under federal raids. Victor Hale tried to retaliate. His men attacked the safe house where Ava and Seok-Jin were coordinating. But Seok-Jin had prepared. His loyalists, men who'd served his father but were sickened by the truth, fought back. The battle was brief and brutal. When the smoke cleared, Victor was cornered, wounded, desperate. Ava stood over him, her father's evidence in her hands. You destroyed lives. Profited from suffering. My father couldn't stop you, but I can. Victor spat blood. You think you're different? You're just like us. Playing judge with other people's sins. No. Ava lowered her weapon. She'd taken one from Seok-Jin's arsenal days ago. I'm giving you to the people you hurt. Federal agents are outside. You'll face trial. You'll spend your life in prison. That's justice. Not vengeance. You should kill me, Victor hissed. I'd kill you. I know. That's the difference between us. When the authorities took Victor away, Seok-Jin approached her quietly. You spared him. What? Because someone has to break the cycle. My father ran. Your father protected monsters. We can't undo their choices, but we can make different ones. She looked at him. What will you do now? Seok-Jin exhaled slowly. I've given the federal prosecutors everything. My family's accounts, properties, records. In exchange, immunity for my men who weren't involved in trafficking. As for me, he smiled sadly. I'll cooperate. Testify. Help them build cases. It won't erase what my family did, But maybe it prevents the next generation from inheriting these sins. That takes courage. Or stupidity. He touched her face gently. You did this. You made me see past the empire to the people it crushed. We did this together. 6 months later, Ravenna Noir reopened. Not as a haven for criminals, but as a community restaurant. Affordable meals, local art on the walls, space for neighborhood gatherings. Ava managed it with Marco. The staff were second-chance employees, people rebuilding their lives. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Seok-Jin visited sometimes, between court appearances and meetings with prosecutors. The empire he'd inherited was gone, dismantled piece by piece. But something else had grown in its place: accountability, purpose, hope. One evening, as they stood in the rebuilt dining room, Seok-Jin said, "Do you regret it?" Speaking those 3 words that night. Ava smiled. Every day? And not at all. We destroyed everything. We built something better. He kissed her forehead. Your father would be proud. So would yours. The man he could have been. We don't choose the legacies we inherit, but we choose what we do with them. Ava and Seok-Jin were born into violence and secrecy, shaped by their father's choices. But when confronted with truth, they chose courage over comfort, justice over vengeance, and accountability over inherited power. Breaking cycles of harm requires us to face uncomfortable truths about where we come from and who we've become. It means choosing to be better than those who came before, even when it costs us everything. Real strength isn't protecting what's broken. It's having the courage to build something new from the ashes. Some legacies deserve to burn. What rises from those ashes is up to us. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Nemeze's story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us what legacy you're choosing to break or build. Your story matters. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, choose courage.